I'm not really sure I had a motivation to become an entrepreneur. I probably happened into it by accident almost, but in the early days, my motivation for running my own business was really driven, to be honest, by money. And I had this, like a lot of people do, I think, had this notion that being an entrepreneur was a really great way to make a lot of money. I suppose 8 years in, my motivations have really changed. In the early days of the company, my motivations very quickly turned to fear of failure, actually. And when the business was getting off its feet, the risk of failure was always really high. So that was a real driving force for me, and not wanting to be proven wrong was a big motivation. But these days, my motivations are different as an entrepreneur. I'm really motivated by the work that we do and the impact that we make for our customers, but also the impact we make for our team. So we've been able to build a really amazing team here in Derry, and the motivation for me is about giving those guys the opportunities, challenging them. I think, like every entrepreneur at the outset, we had more questions than answers, but probably a vision and a willingness to chase that vision. But we certainly didn't have all the answers. We didn't know what the business was for a long time, actually, and it took as long as it took, I think, for us to evolve from the sort of high level vision for what the business might be into a business plan, some products and services that people might actually buy from us. So the notion, I think, that as an entrepreneur you're in control is a bit of a myth. I think entrepreneurs are above everybody else, almost out of control, because there's so many things that you don't have an influence on. You can't make people buy from you. You can't influence the product roadmap in the way that you want to, because your expectations are unrealistic typically. Certainly if you're me, and you can't influence how people come and work for you and interact with your business, because it's not a business. But I think that's what entrepreneurs do. I think entrepreneurs tell stories to get them to get around that, and they accept the fact over time that there's lots of things that you can't control, and you focus on the things that you can, and hope to put yourself into a position where you can mark the other ones off the list at some stage. Keeping going as an entrepreneur is possibly the key. There are days when the business is not doing what it's told, or there are problems that you can't fix, and just keeping the wheels turning is probably your only job on those days. These days, I'm really motivated about growing the business. I'm really motivated about hitting our numbers, about delivering new products, about rolling out new services, about attacking new markets, and beating the competition when it rears its head. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to find motivation, sometimes in unusual places, because you do get sucked into doing quite a lot of jobs that you don't want to do, particularly when the business is early, because there's no one else to do those jobs. So they become yours. So it can be hard to get motivated. But I think the difference is that as an entrepreneur, you know that everything's just a stepping stone. It's just a process. You have to get through this bit of the process to get to the next bit. And when you get there, there'll be more challenges ahead. And that probably keeps me going. Getting our business to our business plan this year is a big driver for me, and something that gets me out of bed every morning. But at the end of the financial year, the clocks go back to zero, and there's another score on the board, and you have to go and chase that one. And I think that's probably what keeps me going. I think as an early stage business, everything's a challenge. So recruiting a team is a big challenge. Raising capital, raising finance is a real big challenge. Getting your first customers is a challenge. Delivering the service once those customers have bought from you on an ongoing basis is probably the biggest challenge. So I think my experience has been that there are just loads of little challenges that you've got to knock off the list one by one. And unfortunately, they don't all line up in a sequence, because sometimes you get hit with those challenges all at the same time. So I think being an entrepreneur is just about not seeing a challenge as a blocker. Just trying to either drive right through it, work around it, go over the top of it, or park it there until you've got the strength to be able to deal with it. I think there's probably a myth around that entrepreneurs are hyper confident and don't ever doubt their own ability. And that's certainly not true in my experience. I've had loads of reasons to doubt whether we can deal with that issue, hit that target, overcome that barrier. And that's not just at the start of this process. The biggest doubt I think you have to overcome is that taking the leap, just jumping off the end of the cliff and hoping that a net will form somewhere in the way down. But in reality, life isn't really as dramatic as that. Lots of people start their own businesses and take a little while to adjust and then take off, or take a little while to adjust and then decide it's not for them. So I think just because you've jumped off the cliff of being an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean that there's no safety net. I think specifically, or particularly these days, when there are a lot more supports and there's a bit more infrastructure around entrepreneurs. But if you are waiting for the day that you don't have any doubts about being an entrepreneur, you'll never jump off the cliff. So my advice to people who are starting out thinking about setting their own business or becoming an entrepreneur is really don't be afraid, because what's the worst that can happen?